Okay, so our next segment is the idea incubator, or also like to call it no time to learn. Pretty original. And in this segment, I ask my guests to share an idea, concept, or theory or an experience that has had a major impact in their life, or just something that they wish to share with other people. And the hope is that I will spend the next 10, 15 minutes trying to learn a new idea. And if I can learn something new today, then anyone can. So, what are you sharing with us?
Shalaj, I love this concept, man. I think what's special about being open to learning about new ideas, and especially maybe some of the ideas that you're not familiar with, is that it opens your mind up in so many different ways that it allows you to create that kind of appreciation for each other. And I wish this is something that I did more of in my life, which is like imploring others and my friends to share more of their unique takes and ideas. So I'm very grateful that you're giving me an opportunity to do this, but at the same time that your show becomes this beautiful incubator of such incredible ideas that span so many different thought processes, frameworks, and topics. So thank you for the opportunity, first of all. Um, but I think for me, maybe this is top of mind. I'm constantly thinking about how development can be brought about in societies that are deeply unequal. Um, and one part of my background is that following my year in China, I had the opportunity to, like I didn't want to leave China. I really enjoyed my time in China, but unfortunately, due to a few visa troubles and like India and China having a little bit of an issue, I had to improvise. Decided to move to India, and over time decided to start my own foundation, working specifically in tribal communities to bring about a better education outcomes to the students living there. Um, so that's my entry into the development sector. And unfortunately, the foundation had to fold out for whatever reason it may. And we don't have to go into that. But it gave me a deep appreciation for the many challenges that on the ground organizations and NGOs face. But at the same time, now in my current role as a consultant for a well established firm, in working in the development space, I also see the other side, which is like, what are the funders looking for? What are they trying to accomplish? What are the keywords that work for them? And at the same time, because of my 2 year experience being on the ground running a grassroots NGO, I've learned about what is it that some of these NGOs struggle with. Now, the biggest struggle that the development sector, especially in India, faces is that there is a clear lack of appreciation from either sides. What I mean by that is you have grassroots NGOs looking at funders and thinking like, okay, these guys are not on the ground. They don't know anything what they're talking about. They just look for keywords. They just want fancy, flashy pictures to show that the money that they've invested into said program is worth it or not. And then on the flip side, you have funders thinking that the grassroots NGOs know nothing. They're not sophisticated. All they do is work with these small, with people on the ground with small scale. They're not thinking about scale. They're not thinking about large scale impact. They're not thinking about fancy, sexy ideas that the world will appreciate that will lead them to more money. So you have this dissonance between like the provider of funds and the provider of services that exists, which leads to this fractured kind of outcomes for the people that need the impact the most. And that's the world that unfortunately developing countries exist in, and a world that needs serious innovation. So that's the context of what I want to talk about. Now, the idea that I want to talk about is not new by any stretch of the word. In fact, it's a hot topic in the development sector these days. It's called philanthropic collaboratives. It's top of mind for me right now because I just recently did a project with my firm focusing on a collaborative. I can't talk more about the specific project, obviously, but it left a deep mark on the way that I think about finding solutions to, global development challenges. A philanthropic collaborative is, as the name suggests, a group of people coming together for whatever purpose to serve a specific philanthropic outcome. Um, Always prior to the establishment and emergence of collaboratives, what we saw was that the funders would exist in one side, they would spend money, and then you would have an NGO, and the NGO would spend the money on the ground, and then you have the beneficiary on the other side. So it was a very linear kind of system in which it was just moved, money moved from here to here to here, and then services were provided. But with the emergence of collaboratives, what we are seeing is that several different donors can come into the picture, several different NGOs can come into the picture, several different beneficiaries can come into the picture, several different intermediaries can come into the picture. What we're talking about is a system in which many different diverse stakeholders and actors are coming together to serve that specific outcome. Now, the biggest challenge to this is that it is different actors and stakeholders coming together to serve a specific outcome. Benefit to it is also that you have so many different stakeholders coming into the same picture to serve this particular outcome. What I want to talk about is that how can philanthropic collaboratives be streamlined in a way that they end up benefiting the beneficiaries in the best possible way, and how can they prevent from just being another fancy word that exists in the development sector for a little while and takes in a lot of funding and then disappears from it. The reason that I think that collaboratives are the future or needs to be the future is because there is a dearth of collaboration in the philanthropic space, because NGOs don't want to share their learnings because the fear that some other NGO might pick up their methodologies, uh, and that they might get more funding to do more. And funders don't want to collaborate because they're like, well, I'm Bill Gates. Why am I collaborating with, I don't know, Tata to do this? I can do it myself. Bring more stakeholders with more incentives to the table to actually create a kind of streamlined process that would lead to NGOs not having to compete with each other, but work with each other so that every beneficiary is given the benefit of all these NGOs. That's the concept that I want to work on and talk about. The challenge that we're seeing today is that even though these structures are being built to get the funding and the money, and millions of dollars are going into collaboratives these days, the problem is they all function in the black and white old form of like how these things go. Usually there's an intermediary that collects all these different monies from all these different funders, maybe small amounts from different funders, and they give it to one or two NGOs that they favor, and the NGOs go and do their thing. The challenge with that again is that we're taking a brand new concept which has legs and we're chopping the legs off of it and saying that, hey, we'll just do it the way it was previously done. um, Now that's the challenge with philanthropic collaboratives. In an ideal world, we'll be talking about NGO 1 bringing in a certain skill set and capability, NGO 2 bringing a certain skill set and capability, all working in the same districts and same areas, and all the benefits going to the same beneficiaries. And then we'll be able to uplift all these communities. You can't have one NGO work on education in one district and another NGO work on health in another district and then expect our human development index to rise. That's not how it works. And you can't expect a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that's focused on healthcare for the longest time to now suddenly invest in I don't know, I think AI technology in the education space. But a pooled money for a collaborative holistic development for the same beneficiaries would be groundbreaking in the development sector, and hopefully one day we'll get to see it.
Can we explore that? Because
Mhm.
you, like you mentioned, you had an NGO, and what I noticed was because it was just two of you, you were able to have a direct control over things, and you were also quicker, faster, more dynamic. Things can change easily, very flexible. I joined you guys on one of your volunteering efforts, and it just felt that we were adapting as we went along. And if it's a big entity, then you have a lot of obstacles on the way. And now, if you're combining 4, 5, 6 different entities, you will have a lot of obstacles, like you mentioned. There will be loss of clarity of responsibility. There'll be some bureaucracy, of course. There'll be some politics involved. How do you divide the funding? And then you have to keep proving this agency is doing this amount, they deserve this much, and then you get into those kind of arguments. And the argument against it is that if you're just a small entity, you can achieve a lot more because you have a lot more control and you're a lot more dynamic. Do you think that exists?
I think fundamentally, if you're working in the development sector, in the development space, beneficiaries have to be front center, the only thing that you focus on. I can't be tied to my methodology or my flexibility or my ease of doing work when I
Yeah.
know that there is another system in which my beneficiaries or people that I'm working with can accomplish and their lives can be enhanced so much better. Right? Who am I to say that okay, it's just I have a little bit of control, there's a lot of flexibility, so screw that. This is what
Mm.
I'm going to do because I run an NGO. I can't think about it like a business. In many ways, I should to be effective and efficient, but not in the way that I hold on to certain things just because it's easy for me. Whatever works for the beneficiary is what I should move towards. So if it's a world in which I bring something or my NGO brings something to the table that, along with several other NGOs, keeping in mind there's a little bit of bureaucracy, some reporting, some mutual learning that'll happen, several meetings that'll happen, I should be glad that this exists, because a world without that is me going and painting a few schools and fixing a few roofs. Whereas a world with all this could mean that the kids get educated, that they have healthcare, that their families have work, that their families have identities, that they can vote, etc., etc. I'm rambling on here, but
Yeah.
always beneficiary first and beneficiary only.
So this leads into a question I have for you about effective altruism.
Mm.
So this is something I've struggled with personally. So love to hear your thoughts on it. On one hand, you have what you did, which is start an NGO and you're on the ground and you're making a direct impact. That's your full time job, right? And you're trying to build something. And on the other hand, you can work in a big MNC or a big firm and you get a good package and you pledge 10 to 20% of your salary every month into charities, which is largely what I try to follow. Probably might have not followed the pledge throughout, but that was the goal. And the arguments are that if you are trying to start your own project, starting something new is very hard. Starting something new in India is even harder. Starting something new in India that doesn't make profit is you have tried to like you're fighting the kraken, right? So you are doing that, and then you have to compare what are you able to achieve from there, how hard it is to build that portfolio, and how hard it is to get funding to just start something from the ground up, or someone like you who can just work in a good company, get a great package, and then pledge that amount to an organization that you know is making an impact. And when you compare that, then you'll have to start noticing which option is making a bigger difference, because there's a constant flow of funding to an organization that needs it, or you're trying to start something that might not make it somewhere. Is this something you struggle with?
Yeah, I think it's always important to realize that, to recognize that you should not be reinventing the wheel over and over again. The value add always has to be in addition to what already exists. And only then should you think about starting an entity, an organization, or whatever that does whatever work, right? We, through my foundation, we were working in communities that got zero help. You've been there, you've seen it, you've been an integral part of the experience. And so these schools weren't painted for 40 years. These schools didn't have roofs that were fixed for XYZ, decades. And so the value add was that we were working in areas that didn't have help before and no one was moving into those regions. So what we brought was a value addition over and above what was already being done. Did what we do, like, was that groundbreaking? Like, was no one else able to paint or, like, fix roofs and all of that? Absolutely not. Everybody can do that. But we worked in an area in which it wasn't done at all and it wasn't going to be done. And so that was the value add. So one can be working in places that others are unable to reach. Another can be bringing in some new idea that nobody else can execute, or that you have special expertise in that you can do better than what's existing. That's a great value add as well. The third one is that you genuinely are moving in a direction in which that on the ground experience is going to allow you to, do whatever kind of, impact at a much higher level someday down the line. I'm all for that as well. I think I'm sick and tired of funders just thinking and not realizing the on the ground reality and just thinking that there's only one way that, I'm going to fund the famous organizations or like the well known ones. But you, with your little bit of experience on the ground, you realize that there are so many tiny little NGOs that work there that are indispensable to this experience. So maybe your 1 or 2 years that you spend working on the ground, you make those connections, realizing that they have so much value add. So maybe one day when you return to your corporate job, you are more mindful about, oh, maybe this organization that gets millions of dollars from large organizations is not what I need to be supporting, but that I can support some smaller entities, or that I can even support a teacher that is working on the ground by giving him like XYZ amount to do whatever it is that he's doing. So that appreciation for how things work on the ground, about the delivery, about the access, that only comes from on the ground experience. So I'm not as skeptical as others are about individuals who want to start doing good in the world and starting an organization. Maybe I'm biased because I did that myself, but I think any good is usually better than no good. And so if your heart is in the right place and you want to do the kind of work that you're doing and it is a value add, sure, by all means, go ahead. But at the same time, if you're comfortable with just giving a portion of your money to an organization that deserves it, by all means, there are so many organizations that could do so can do such great work and reach so many children and students and people in need with the kind of work that they're doing, and maybe your money supports that, and that's great as well. So there's no real way, I think there's no real right or wrong way to support any kind of initiative.
So, what are some leading philanthropic collaboratives around or in India, and how can people get involved?
So I think in terms of supporting collaboratives, it sits at a level above, maybe individual contributions is what I would say. The idea of a philanthropic collaborative comes to me because it has that scale. It's got that scale because you have large organizations pumping large amounts of money to do large amounts of work on the ground. But if you're talking about what individual contributions can do, what I greatly say is that look at communities that are not getting the support. Maybe it's your little village that you're from, or maybe it's a community that you have never heard of. Mumbai gets enough money. Delhi gets enough money. Large cities get enough money because it's easy for you to go and monitor them. And so large organizations are constantly pumping into big cities. Look beyond that, is what I would say. There are so many organizations where your money could be far more impactful than, let's say, making an already $1 million NGO I mean, have even more money. Not saying that that is not going to be useful, just saying that if you are starting out on your philanthropic journey and you want to put your money where you might be able to see the biggest difference, find places that are not getting that money, find rural places, find communities that have been oppressed for years and years and years, be it because of caste, be it because of creed, because of social stratifications. Find them, find those organizations, and your money will go a far longer distance there.